this fictional character Harry Bosch. So Michael Connelly's written a series of novels with the same character, but they all exist. They're all sort of pretty much set in LA, and what you find is these different characters will come and go through the book. So each book, you don't need to have read book C or book B in order to, enjoy any individual. Each book is standalone, but the more you read, the more kind of fleshed out the characters become, the more you feel part of the universe. And these two layers represent like the mythos or the story world. So these books exist not in isolation, but as part of a bigger whole. And what's interesting about this is that there's a real world that he sort of draws upon, and the sort of typical themes are the LA Times, the LAPD, the FBI, Los Angeles, and also events in the history of Los Angeles, like the Rodney King beatings, and how their characters react to that. And all this gives it a certain authenticity. And if this were a science fiction or fantasy, then all that mythos would have to be developed from scratch, like Star Wars. Then you don't have that real world thing to draw on, unless you go right back, then they probably start with sort of like the first sort of spaceship launch or something like that. So looking at the sort of, let's say, the Hollywood franchise idea, it's basically taking this idea where you've got a feature film, and often what they might do is do a web series or a comic book to launch the feature. And you see this quite a lot now on AAA computer console games, where you'll have the main game and then a web series to kind of launch it. Alan Wake and Assassin's Creed did this type of thing. But what's interesting about this sort of model, it's a series of sort of single media experiences. While you're watching the feature film, you're not like you're not on your iPhone while you're watching the feature film. And so if we look at sort of mapping out these different types of transmedia experience, what I've just described is in this quadrant here, where you've got multiple, like if you look at the narrative space, so a particular story, we're covering lots of different ground, but it's always on a single medium. You've only got the book, or you've only got the film, or you've only got the game. Now if we move over here, we might be telling a single story, so it's set in one time and place with one set of characters, but now we're spreading it across multiple platforms. It's online, it's on mobile, it might be a real experience, like a real place. So this would be how I'd represent this, and this is these alternate reality games, where you're expected to go from the event, get an email from a particular character, listen to audio, go over to YouTube, and it's only by piecing together this sort of puzzle that you get the full experience. And often what we find is that people are mixing and matching, so they might have, all of this is part of the same story world. Feature film lives on its own, and so does a comic book, and then the ARG, which is a mix, kind of feeds into the overall experience. So why is it popular? Well, I think it's becoming the kind of thing that younger people expect. They expect, they're used to sitting and watching, and not only younger people, I'm not young and I do it as well. You're kind of watching the TV, you've got the laptop open, you might be researching background content while the show's on. It might be simple factual stuff, or it could be looking at other sort of story content now it builds in. And also, I think this is one of the main drivers for a lot of the bigger properties, is that there's such an explosion of content. As the cost of sort of production and distribution's gone down, there's so much stuff out there, and lots of people producing content feel sort of overwhelmed with trying to find an audience for their content. And so Transmedia gives them more sort of ways in to the audience, more opportunities to be discovered. And I think also if you're, say if you're an independent creator and you feel under pressure from lots of user-generated content, as lots of people do, this is a way to raise your game by, trying to develop a bigger story world and and seeing how you can add value with your story and telling it across these different platforms, and trying to deliver the story in a way that more closely reflects the audience lifestyle. As people are getting more familiar with like snacking on different kind of episode content, to find a way to tie that all in. So, and I'll come on to how Transmedia feeds into advocacy. And also what we find is that people from the marketing world, realising that people are trying to bypass ads, that shouting louder is becoming less and less effective. And that if you can create some cool content and some engaging experiences and pull people towards you, then that pays dividends in the longer term. And I often like to put this up because some of the critics of Transmedia say, well, and they often referring to art or particular comic books that are given away for free. They're saying this stuff wouldn't exist in its own right. It's all, it's all been paid for by marketing and it's been driven by marketing. I think anything that we do, you should have this the marketing should come baked in. But often when you do a feature film, particularly if it's driven by a single sort of creator, if it's driven by a writer, they find that they're producing or the director. They've got other kind of personal creative goals, and they tend to only have one eye on the audience and the other eye on the kind of the kick that they're getting out of creating this content, which is why it's better to have a producer that's trying to make money and a creative person that's not. But I think you can get away with it more when you're in single media. But when you're trying to do transmedia, then it makes more sense to really bake the marketing, really understand the audience, and ask yourself tough questions about why are they going to move on from one piece of content to the next content. And I'm going to look at that when I come to measuring ROI. So are there any questions on the Transmedia? Hi. So I think often when people look at how do we cost justify return on investment in Transmedia, what they mean is how do I cost justify giving loads of stuff away for free? People working on a comic book or a web series. So there's a number of assumptions that I've made in answering that question. One is that you do have something to sell. There is something that is actually revenue generating. So whatever you give away for free is an investment that's going to be paid back somewhere else. I'm also saying that the free content and experiences are shareable. Now, recently, so Fallout New Vegas is a new console game, and they gave away a comic book as a prequel on the iPhone. But the problem I found with that is that it wasn't shareable. And I think the whole point of giving away free content is that you empower advocates to tell their friends to give it away to someone else. And so you're kind of missing a trick really if you only give it away for free, you don't make it shareable. And the same with experiences, to allow people and give them opportunities to shoot stuff on their mobile, upload it, take photographs, put it on their Facebook page. I also think that it works better if it's part of an ongoing relationship with a consumer or with the audience, so that you don't just have a standalone thing that you're looking to sell and then that's the end of it. That you do have, some kind of content strategy that right now this is what we're working on, but then in 6 months or a year there's going to be more content. So it's part of an ongoing dialogue and relationship building exercise. So just looking at a couple of those things, with like any kind of multi-platform strategy in Transmedia, what I've shown here is that you've got content that is spreadable, it's good for getting attention, good for establishing credibility. And up here, we've got revenue. And what you find is that platforms that are good for generating revenue, by their nature, aren't spreadable, because normally they're locked down in some particular way with rights management. Whereas you've got other content here, like YouTube and piracy, that's good for spreading the content, but you don't make much money. And what I'm saying is that it's fine to do that, and it's fine to do that, but it's good to have a mix, because this will drive audiences to the revenue side of things. Now also, this might be a little bit small, but when you look at your content and you understand who's consuming it and why they're consuming it, and at what stage in the relationship that they're consuming it, So here I've got these 3 stages of engagement, going from discovery, where somebody first finds out about your content, through to the experience, where they're actually consuming it, and then exploration. So after after a good experience, then you go hunting for more stuff when you want to find out more. And when I've been working with people, what I often find is that they generate loads of exploration content and assume that people will dig deep even before they've gone through this stage. It's asking people for like you go on a date and you ask them to get laid or have a snob on the first night before you've done all this kind of teasing. That's the way I like to look at it. So when, like here, I've got like teaser content. This is the sort of stuff. This might be for free as well, but it's understanding who's consuming it and at what stage of the relationship. So to look at cost justifying giving stuff away for free, you need to look at what your goals are. And the 4 goals that I think there are is awareness, advocacy, generating sales, and generating insights. So I've got a slide on each of these things to go in a little bit more, but generating awareness is basically, does somebody know and remember your product or your brand? Do they recall it when you ask them, have you heard about such and such? And the way you cost justify that is by looking at comparisons with other ways to generate awareness. Advocacy, basically looking at different word of mouth methodologies. Net promoter, there's customer value matrix. Sales is straightforward, more or less, if you can measure it. And then the insights come where you have this relationship with your audience that they're telling you how to develop your product or how to evolve your storyboard because they feel engaged with it and they're getting you set up this sort of feedback. So, awareness. So as I said, so awareness is measured by recall, and one way to look at it is by comparing it with other opportunities like poster ads or TV campaigns and so on. And there's been a number of studies, although I couldn't find a good one, I don't think so, where rich media and interactive media has a better recall than, let's say, banner ad or TV. So with a TV campaign, you can reach loads of people. But when you ask people the following day, did you see that ad, or what was that product? The recall isn't as good as if it's for something that's interactive or for some of these rich media things. The problem you have with the rich media is often getting the audience is actually achieved. You can't, it's difficult to get the same number of eyeballs. But what you're doing here is saying, well, okay, I've got fewer eyeballs, I've got fewer views, but these people actually remember it more. And when you're looking at doing the cost comparisons, you look at saying, well, how much do I need to spend to get the same level of recall? So it might be cheaper to do one particular type of, it might be cheaper to do banner ads, but if nobody ever sees them or remember them, even though they can say, well, 200,000 people viewed this banner ad, then maybe that's not as effective as doing some interactive experience. And I guess you can see this kind of like in the classroom as well. I mean, if you can, a bit like I'm doing now, if I just, the teacher just sort of stands and tells the kids something, how many of them will remember what they've been taught? Whereas if you give them an exercise and they actually get in and get involved in it, then they're more likely to remember it. And so it is, I think, with the transmedia experiences, that they're actually getting in, they're exploring the storyboard, and they're much more likely to feel some kind of ownership of it. So I felt this wasn't quite what I was looking for, but it just gives an idea of different recall rates compared to different types of content. Because viral video and podcast, all the rich media stuff is up at the top end. So looking at advocacy, this is basically when people recommend your product or your content to somebody else. So online it might be sharing or liking, but the model that I've chosen here is looking at word of mouth. And basically what you've got in this net promoter model are 3 different types of person, 3 different types of the audience. You've got people that consume your content and they're like, you know, it's all right.